All right, welcome to another episode of Big Cash Breakthrough, your gateway to digital wealth. Please welcome Joshua Seymour, a seasoned crypto enthusiast and investor since 2016, with a keen interest in platforms like BitShares, Steemit, EOS, Eden, and Fractally. Joshua focuses on regenerative systems over degen ones and is deeply engaged in the development of network state technologies. He is currently involved in an ambitious early stage project, Super Civilization, aimed at evolving into a comprehensive network state. Welcome, Joshua.
Hey, John. Glad to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation. How's it going?
Good. Yeah, I'm always curious to know how people got into crypto. Like, how did they hear about it? How did they get started? Were they interested immediately? Did they get it immediately? What was your story?
Yeah, one of my friends who's like a super early adopter of things and like notices trends and stuff, he introduced me to it back in 2016. And we were doing like consulting at the time, like different kinds of services for different businesses that we liked, that we were maybe like members of their community. And we even started getting some of our clients to pay us in Bitcoin back then. And I think it was like, I don't remember the prices, but I want to say it was like in the 500, 600 range or something. And so we were getting like pretty good payments in Bitcoin, getting these clients hooked up. There was like services already starting to hit the scene, like BitPay and something for paying your workers, like a wage pay thing I remember seeing out there. And I should have held on to all that Bitcoin back then in hindsight, but I was just like the guy with the pizza back in the day, just like spending it and converting it and stuff. And that was my first introduction to it. But I really didn't become super interested in getting involved in anything in crypto until I started to see and notice what was happening with the different kind of projects that Daniel Larimer was involved in, which is, I think, a mutual point of interest for you and I on our journey. And then things started to really, my involvement in crypto really started to change a lot when I noticed what was happening there, because it started to align more with my like bigger goals and intentions, like my purpose for waking up every day and all that kind of stuff. And it became very exciting for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So yeah, you got paid in crypto in the beginning. And what kind of services were you providing? I'm curious, like what business you're in.
Yeah, it was like branding and marketing and web design and setting up online systems, like a lot of WordPress based business systems, many people selling digital products and stuff. Like one particular company that's still around today. At the time it was called Subtle Energy Sciences, but we ended up helping them rebrand to just Subtle Energy. And they were selling these, at the time it was like the beginning of a new industry. Basically, they were selling digital media files, like images and audios and videos that were encoded with energetic signatures. And they have a pretty great customer base, but they needed like a lot of modern systems and stuff like that. And I specifically remember us talking this founder into paying us in Bitcoin.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. And it's such a natural, I think, industry space, like digital assets they were selling. It's almost, yeah, this is actually even similar to crypto and NFTs that they seem to have been already offering. It's
Yeah.
from what I
Yeah,
hear.
the big
Yeah.
intersection is
Yeah.
that these products are created with like processes of quantum entanglement and stuff like that, and the people that innovate them have to have a certain level of consciousness to know like what they're doing. And it's dangerous because you can be like messing people up. Like this particular founder had he went through brainwave entrainment technologies. Like he went through different things in order to get into the space where he was at, like with that, to get to that level of innovation. And nowadays, like brainwave entrainment is so common, you can just go on like YouTube and just listen to a frequency or something. But what is that thing really doing to you, and who's really developing it? But what's interesting with the internet, that crypto is obviously a big part of, is supposedly we're moving into like the quantum age of the internet. And so all of these current protocols, these encryption protocols, Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these other networks, I don't think any of them are using quantum encryption. The quantum encryption is what they're going to have to be able to evolve and adapt onto if they want to survive what's coming, right? Because the quantum computers can decrypt all of these protocols so fast and easy. And so the question is going to be like, is Bitcoin as a network, is it going to be able to adopt quantum encryption fast enough? Is Ethereum agile enough where it can adopt quantum encryption? Which networks are going to have the agility and the adaptability to embrace the next generation of the internet? And that's going to be interesting to see as we go forward, because we're getting pretty close. I think maybe 2030, it's like it's almost here. we'll probably be working with the next generation. Have you heard things about this?
Not specifically, but I think it was always a risk with Bitcoin throughout the years. The idea that, hey, if someone breaks this encryption, then that's a vulnerability to Bitcoin. And that was always the case. And the answer was always that, hey, it's a very low probability, at least now. And the idea is that Bitcoin could upgrade their encryption in the future when this happens. But I do think, yeah, you always have to be careful. You can't put all your eggs in one basket, one technology basket. So I always say, yeah, Bitcoin, I'm a true believer, but still, like there's always these even technological risks with it that people just have to be aware of and just accept and understand that there may be a process to upgrade it when necessary, right? So that there'll hopefully be some sort of social upgrade to it, or technological upgrade, but some social consensus of, okay, if someone takes advantage of it, we snapshot it at this point in time and then upgrade it to the new quantum proof kind of. And I think that was the answer. I think that. But what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, we're going to find out. There's so many like smart, cool people involved in Bitcoin and in crypto in general. And that's the cool thing about it is you can meet so many amazing people that you maybe otherwise wouldn't have been able to meet, but crypto and different crypto projects just magnetize awesome people. And Bitcoin is so strong, I think, because of how magnetic it has been with people that are very like freedom oriented and they want a parallel alternative system. It was started for all of the right reasons. And there has been some tyranny of the status quo and that kind of stuff. And we'll have to see if it can weather the storm. But so far, it's like the best thing that we have had in our known history. And there still isn't anything better yet as far as what the intention of Bitcoin has always been.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great way to put it. So from Bitcoin and getting paid to following Dan Larimer, who created BitShares originally. It was actually probably late 2014, 2015, 2016, and that was BitShares, and then Steam it in 2016. So that was around the time, you were exploring crypto. So what was your experience? What the first experience you had with Dan Larimer projects? I think it was BitShares was the first, it seems.
Actually, I think it was Steam, and I think my friend that
Sure.
introduced me to Bitcoin introduced me to Steam it because he was
Okay.
following the early adoption stuff, and then I discovered BitShares through the grapevine or doing research. Like, oh, okay, this guy's involved in BitShares, and he also was involved in this other project. So I learned about BitShares in retrospect. By the time I started like playing around with it, it was basically a decentralized exchange, maybe one of the first ones that actually got some traction. The community had already died out a little bit. Like it wasn't that easy to trade on it and there just wasn't as much volume on the exchange at that time. But then I noticed what Dan was doing. I noticed things happen with Steemit, and Dan moved on to a different project, which was basically, I think, out of his own. He created all those projects out of frustration from communicating with Satoshi back on like the Bitcoin messaging boards and stuff. And there's that famous quote. I don't remember exactly what it is, but basically like Satoshi felt like he was trying to convince Dan of his vision or something. And Dan was like, no, there's some real problems here. And so Dan went out to solve those problems. And I think out of his own frustration, he needed to build like a network and a protocol that could actually handle the kind of applications that he wanted to build. And then there was problems with BitShares with governance. There's problems with Bitcoin with governance for people who are like really into it. There's problems with Steemit with governance. In the grand scheme of things, they're better governance models than what we've seen in many cases, but none of them have really been able to fully overcome this fundamental problem that Larimer's been obsessed with, which is tyranny of the status quo. So I really like his principles and his philosophical approach to the projects he was building. And I like how, from an entrepreneur perspective, this guy has been able to have an idea that he wants to experiment with and then launch something, and people gather around it and the experiment unfolds, and the creative process and testing the hypothesis and finding the flaws and all of that. And then basically don't just stay there. Now let's go on and innovate the next thing and capture all those learnings. And I thought that was pretty awesome and interesting. And there's not really a lot of people out there that are so principled. And so I really fell in love with kind of the communities that Larimer was magnetizing with like more of his philosophical approach. And still today, a big fan of that guy. And I love all the people that I've met, like yourself, John, through basically communities that sort of organized around these different solutions that were born with a very entrepreneurial approach. how have you felt observing some of these experiments by this guy we're talking about? And what have you thought about like the people that you've met along the way from some of these projects?
Yeah, it's incredible. I think Dan Larimer has inspired many and had a unique philosophy that was aligned with kind of some of my experience as more of the libertarian guy. And so it was it was great. So I had the same path towards being I would say a Dan Larimer follower, like an acolyte. But so it was great. So just meeting everybody with like-minded people has been incredible. And I think, yeah, even though people give him flack for kind of starting up new projects all the time, I think there was a good reason to keep improving and innovating and experimenting on different designs, improvements, and things like that. And it's hard to do it with one ecosystem, right? Like they're entirely different. Steemit was entirely different from BitShares. EOS was a very general purpose platform. So you couldn't really just try to repurpose like a previous platform to something new, right? So I think, so I don't blame him for trying entirely new projects every couple years. But my curiosity is, okay, so governance has always been an important thing, and he started writing about that in team, let's say around right or maybe even late 2016, and prepping up for this launch of EOS, and he was writing on Steemit. So what were your thoughts about the original ideas around governance with EOS, and what are your takeaways with that? Because I think one of the differentiators of EOS was supposed to be this governed blockchain, right? Like with all the problems in the past, problems in Bitcoin, like we'd have a more formal process for governance with this delegated proof of stake consensus system. So what was your experience throughout the beginning, even before it launched to after it launched, and all the things that happened after?
Yeah, I think it's been awesome to just see things unfold, to see all the networks that launched off of the one protocol. And I think, many of them have really put delegated proof of stake and those governance models to the test and demonstrated them so well that networks like Ethereum ended up moving to delegated proof of stake and stuff like that. And EOS was created out of frustration of looking at Ethereum and the direction they were going, and it just wasn't innovative enough. So, and now I guess now things have, the community have evolved to take control of their own protocol. Now we call it the Antelope protocol in the ecosystem. So it seems to be working. It definitely has flaws, and there have been people that have organized around like, how can we solve these kinds of flaws that we've observed? But it's definitely functional, and really cool projects have emerged. But my biggest takeaway is I think there is a high risk to launching general purpose projects where if you don't have a definitive enough purpose, it's like how they say in marketing, if you don't appeal to particular people, then you try to appeal to everyone, then you appeal to no one ultimately. And I think there's something to it, because not a lot of people really magnetized to the general purposeness of what was originally called EOS or EOS.io. And also a lot of the blockchains that launched, with maybe some rare exceptions, they were all like generic purposed. And this is a playground for any kind of idea. And I think the trouble that I noticed in some of the ecosystems is people couldn't really properly rally together. Some of the EOS ecosystems is they couldn't rally together around like a common goal, get on the same page. And so in some ways that's cool. And maybe in the long tail, it will work itself out. But I'm myself, after seeing so many different experiments, I'm a major fan of very opinionated approaches to things. And there can be many different opinions and people can organize around those. But the idea that let's just create this thing and anything is possible. If I was to launch a blockchain network, for example, it would be like a one commandment golden rule that you cannot use this technology to harm anyone. Like you couldn't build things where you're like murdering people with the technology. We would not allow that to happen. But a lot of these technologies are used for any purpose that people want. And in some cases that's okay. And I know crypto is supposed to be like anti-censorship. And when I say like my example of having an opinion about something, it's basically there would be a form of censorship, because if you're using this to murder people, we would cut off your ability to use it. We wouldn't support your ability to do that. But that's like with a certain kind of moral compass. And that's my biggest takeaway from my observations so far in crypto overall, but particularly looking at that segment of crypto that a lot of people, unfortunately, I don't think they had the privilege of observing all these experiments unfold and seeing those iterative innovation cycles and stuff. So I think it's doing well, but I think the original innovator just saw the learnings, the failures, the learnings to be captured from those, and seeing how like we can do this better. And it's interesting how a lot of communities, like if you look at what's happening, I really like the network state movement that intersects with crypto and other things. And the network state is like the evolution of what might logically survive a nation state. But the nation state is a pretty old concept, and there were things before the nation state, like there was the city state, and there were kingdoms and other approaches and stuff. So there have been these evolutions of, let's say, technological advancement or ideas or whatever systems, but for some reason people still like linger and lag and cling to like the old stuff. They don't like move with the innovation. And maybe that's just something that just naturally happens, like with the curve of adoption and stuff like that. Like right now, a lot of people are still slow to adopt crypto, and we're moving in the adoption curve. Probably, maybe we're starting to hit I don't know how you feel about this, John, but I think we might be starting to get into the early majority, if you're familiar with the bell curve of adoption. Or do you think we're still pretty much just in the early adopter range? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think in some respects, because of the ETF, we may be past the early adopter stage and just near what is it? I forget, yeah, the terms, but yeah, just kind of in the middle.
The early majority, and then the early minority, I think or maybe it's the
Okay.
other way around.
Okay, so it's probably the early majority stage, at least for some aspects of it. But then I think there's such a spectrum of technologies that I think Bitcoin, just specifically talking about Bitcoin, I think we've reached more of the early majority stage just because of the ETF, and people at least recognize it. Institutions seem like there's arguments about how much they've already put in so far, but if a majority of them, of course, put their money in, then I think we're there in terms of adoption. But I still think it's still early, and they quite haven't gotten enough of an allocation to say that it's legitimized even from an institutional standpoint. Anyway, so that would be my thoughts. But maybe if you could explain, for those that don't know, what is a network state? And I also wanted to circle back on the original kind of thought about being opinionated, which is, I think, an interesting point. But what is the network state? How do you explain it to people? And yeah, what gets you excited so much about this idea in crypto?
Yeah, to tie it back in with what we were talking about. So
Yeah.
Dan's innovation culminated in something that came together as like the Fractally white paper. So after these different business systems and social systems and political systems were created and experimented with, and these experiments ran their cycles and courses, Dan then got together with a team in his community and combined it all into one solution. And then they started working on it and people started organizing around it. And I still think, even though some stuff in there might be a little bit outdated, because experiments have been run based on what was in that original version of that white paper. Not too long after that was published and things started happening, Balaji published his book, The Network State, and it really took hold, where it brought together a lot of different communities, and like people that are interested in DAOs, people that are interested in crypto, people that are interested in other things beyond just crypto, like the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist movements and all that kind of stuff. People building basically a network state, going back to your question, is like a parallel society. So the idea of parallel societies is not new. Cryptocurrency is like a massive example of a parallel economic system and parallel societies that are emerging. Bitcoin is a parallel society for sure, but no parallel society has fully gone through the stages of evolution, like how startups go through stages of evolution and they might reach some of their very late stage forms. Nothing has really evolved into what the author of The Network State, Balaji, is describing as what would eventually become a network state. So he basically breaks down development stages of parallel societies. And for people that are into building new things or new paradigms or new structures, into like new approaches to companies or communities or countries or whatever, DAOs, even before DAOs, there were things that were it were already happening, like self-governance organizations like holacracy and other sociocracy, and things that are like a whole movement and niche of people have existed and evolved in industry before like DAOs ever came on the scene. And people in DAOs maybe think that they were like the innovators of these things, but everyone's always standing on the shoulders of. So Balaji describes the network state as you start as a startup society and you have a founder and you have one commandment that you stand for. And then basically you tried, and it's an online community basically. And then you try to evolve that online community into something capable of collective action. And if you can do that, and I'm paraphrasing, then you would become a network union. And then that network union that would have more of a global digital focus would start to progress into crowdsourcing and crowdfunding physical, local land and properties, and it could become a network archipelago of, if you go to the network state website and look at the image of a network state, it's like a scoreboard kind of, where you have these different metrics that you're trying to, some of these key metrics that you want to increase, like you want to increase the size of the population, you want to increase the economic activity and the income that's being generated and the activity among the members, and you want to increase the real estate footprint. And if you add all that together and you make it big enough, then you could have the power to negotiate. Because as individuals, if we don't work together with enough people and have sophisticated enough systems, we become very easy to just be bullied and pushed around. And although we would like to have independence, especially in the age of high technology, like if you just go build a castle in a moat, some little like teenagers with drones could probably just capture your land and tie you up. And you don't really have the freedom that you thought that you had. Or they could turn off your systems and lock you in your house. Like, who's going to come to your defense? What kind of community is going to rally behind you and be like, you're one of us and you can't do that to one of us, type of a thing. So to really have individual independence, we have to learn how to work together and collaborate and build things collectively. And so there's like the individual and collective thing simultaneously you have to have the right balance of it. And Dan and the people organized around his work have really been doing good stuff, moving in that direction. And Dan starts a fire and then like walks away from it as an innovator, which is a textbook innovator kind of thing to do. But people keep going with those ideas because they're good ideas. So I think there's a good intersection between what culminated in the Fractally white paper and the idea of the network state. And the Fractally white paper was a little less opinionated, or a little more opinionated is what I meant to say, than some of Dan's other stuff. And the network state has a little bit of an opinion to it, but it's still not super opinionated. But if you take these systems and you create something that has a pretty strong opinion to it, then I think we could get people going in a direction where they're going to get the results that they want without having to, if you don't opt into something that kind of has a particular opinion around it, where everyone's like literally on the same page, then they just devolve into chaos among each other and they don't figure out how to like get that collective actual action going for the mutual benefit. So it's just an online community, but there's not really truly a powerful collective action going on. Or if they are organized, they're like, what they're building is not really going to be here in 5 or 10 years on the long tail of the mega trend of what we're going through with human evolution. A lot of systems are not going to survive. Like online casinos are not really going to be that stimulating 5 or 10 years from now. People are not, maybe like a certain faction, but it won't be like a thing that people do for stimulation. People just do that because they don't really have any connection to who they are as a human being. They have nothing more stimulating them, driving them, but that's not going to last much longer here for various reasons. So on that topic, do you have another thought or question, John?
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for that, the context. So maybe explain, what do you think Fractally's opinion is, and the network state maybe has a little bit of an opinion, and I'm interested in your opinion. So 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Like, what's the opinion that you're focused on these days?
Yeah.
But
So
we could,
the context of the Fractally white paper was like collaborating for mutual benefit, specifically for public goods, is what I recall. And so that's at least something, right? And the network state is, the founder definitely has like a real OG bit type of philosophy, and like in terms of freedom and individual liberty and independence and all that kind of stuff. And he's definitely a technologist. And so he's got a lot of the right kind of moral compass, just like Daniel Larimer does. But I think the opinions are that people should move toward creating what might eventually become network states. And there's lots of different examples of things, including the Bitcoin network, that are like almost there, but not quite, like doesn't have all the components which are described in the definition of what would make a network state. And I think he intends it to be used in a way that's like beneficial for humanity and people working on cool stuff, but it's just an idea, and ideas can be used for any purpose. And so I think he's just advocating the idea, and maybe he and his confidants and social circles are taking that idea and moving it in a particular way. But a lot of innovators and technologists, I think they just put out their ideas, and then whoever wants to do whatever with them, and they enjoy that. They enjoy just putting out something that can be used for almost any purpose. So my opinion is how the ideas of Fractally and the network state should be used. And it goes along with what I was just alluding to a moment there. So if I was going to like super summarize it, I would say, if you're looking at what's happening in the world, and if you're familiar with things like story structure, like the hero's journey, like you're individually on your journey, everybody tuning in, if you have a business and you're serving people, and you're like serving an audience or a customer base or whatever, they have their individual journey. And then we're all on a collective journey. And if I was looking at the news cycle and the current things, and I was trying to like, what the heck is going on? The 3 XYZ coordinates that I would use to recontextualize things is, I would first of all realize that we're going through an awakening, like an evolution of our consciousness. And there are things in the English speaking world, like where people talk about the awakening in different ways, or being woke or whatever, where they're like, they understand something's going on, but maybe they don't realize specifically what it is, what that awakening is. And I would describe it as, we're going from a past for a long time where most of us have been reliant on external authorities for guidance and for stimulation. And it's mostly been like religious and political leaders, and I guess business leaders nowadays. And then people that are more conscious and aware and have more internal authority, they have guided from how most people are in like a following mode mentality. And that has created an anti-civilization, where every structure of civilization is based on this following mode mentality. And if we look at the different structures of civilization, they're all part of collectively what is like an anti-civilization. And so the mother of all conspiracies is that we live in an anti-civilization based on this like old mentality. However, the survival pressures of the anti-civilization are now causing people to wake up and pop like popcorn kernels. And it's forcing more and more people to become self-leaders and activate their internal authority, and get to the point where they realize that I don't really need people to tell me how to live and spend my money and run my business and all that kind of stuff. And Bitcoin is like a great example of the reflection of this evolution that's happening. And it's in a we're in a domino effect where the anti-civilization is it's collapsing, and it's causing more survival pressures. So more people are waking up. So the following mode is still more dominant, and the anti-civilization is still more dominant. But the mentality that's emerging based on people's internal guidance and not needing to rely on external authorities for their survival, that's causing a new civilization to emerge. And it's not the more dominant one yet, but they do both exist in parallel, both mentalities and both civilizations based on these mentalities. And you could call the new civilization, you could call it like the civilization of the universe. I like to call it the super civilization. And that's why I've named this particular project that I'm working on the super civilization. But basically, as things progress, the new mentality and the new civilization is going to become more dominant, and we'll reach like a flippening, where basically the regens on one side will be more dominant than the degens on the other side. And then eventually the old thing is just going to fade away because there won't be enough of a mentality to support it. So the civilization will just keep collapsing. And I'm pretty sure at this point that we're at a point of no return, where you can't really stop this evolution. So there's expressions out there about the Great Awakening and no one can stop what's coming and stuff. And I think from a narrative perspective, they might be onto something, but I think they're not fully contextualizing what's really going on. And so the kind of projects that I've always been drawn to are like, who's building these new systems in parallel? Because I was introduced to these concepts that I'm talking about right now and where things were headed when I was a teenager, back in like when I was still in high school, back in like 2004, 2005. And so I've lived my entire adult life still having to overcome my own personal development quirks and stuff. But I've looked at the world knowing from a big picture perspective, like what's going on and where we're going. And so I've always gravitated to where we're going. I played hockey when I was growing up, and my dad coached us, and there was this expression in hockey that's very common, like you don't skate to where the puck is at, you skate to where the puck is going. And so I've always tried to do that. And I think you're one of those kind of people too. I think everyone in crypto is like one of those people we can see the writing on the wall, we see where it's going. And the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is you don't really have to try to fix the old world. You just need to detach from it and build the new world, and it will just collapse on its own. You just don't want to be like in the way of all of that aftermath of it collapsing. And so if we just focus on building what we do want, and in contrast to what we don't want, then we will arrive at a point where the world that we're building, it's not only great for us, but it becomes the new normal, the more dominant plan. The only question, I guess, is like the timing. Like, how long is it going to take for us to complete the evolution, and can we like speed it up? Can we accelerate it? And I see a lot of conversations out there, like in what used to be called Twitter, now is referred to as X. I see these little niche communities about accelerating certain things. Do you see that? People putting things in their name or their bio, like EAC or something, like they're accelerating something. Have you seen that phenomenon?
Yeah, definitely, especially in the AI space, because there's also some pushback against the dangers of AI, and then there are people that are trying to fight back against the narrative of we have to slow down, that technology is, I guess, we're meant to accelerate it, and that there aren't the dangers that we see there. So I think maybe I'm not describing it as well as someone in that movement can, but yeah, so they're the accelerationists, and I think it's specific, or it's actually focused around AI a lot of times. But I do think things are accelerating, right? And your timeline of 5 years, whether it's from a religious perspective or another perspective, it does seem to, I think, many people and many more people every day, that things are moving a lot faster and change is happening a lot faster. And I can see that, especially in the AI space as well. Things are scary to see how fast things are moving. So yeah, I don't think I object to any of the timeline. But it's interesting to see how you're thinking about it from a high level, like how you're thinking about society and how they can evolve, because some people might be skeptical about people's like general ability to be independent, right? And following just natural, right? Or can there be another paradigm, right? So I think you're suggesting that it could be the majority, really, that people can break free and be independent and be leaders of at least themselves first and foremost, and even outside of that. So it's fascinating. So maybe for the last piece, since we're running a little bit out of time, but super civilization, like what's your stage? I know it's pretty early right now, but what's your vision 5 years
Yeah.
from now, 2030?
Yeah.
What
I
is
mean,
society? What does this parallel society look like in your mind?
yeah, so maybe
Mhm.
optimistically, 5 years from now, maybe it could be a network state with a pretty good sized population. So if you were being super bullish, maybe like 100 million people. Right now, it's very early stages, and I'm going to be building an audience and like drawing in like a community and partners and stuff the rest of this year, and then maybe launching something at the beginning of January is the current plan and timeline. So if I'm successful making noise out there, sparking stuff in the world, then the launch will go off as planned in January, and then things will just take a life of their own between now and then. And if things go, then we should see the parallel society going through these different stages of development that Balaji describes, maybe not perfectly to the book, but more or less like going through those different stages, just like how startups go through different stages. And so this could be a project that maybe becomes one of the first network, like actual true network states by the definition. And I think it's going to have a lot of unique elements that really make it work in the marketplace, and that also draw in a lot of the right people. So if anyone is interested, basically just keep up with me and the project. But it's not even like you might be the first person that really knows anything about it at this point. You and whoever's listening to this recording of our conversation, that's how early stage it is. But it's the culmination of a lot of ideas. It's pretty much the culmination of my life's work and a small team of other people. And I think we've just got things like almost like a bamboo plant, not exactly the same timeline as bamboo, but you know how there's a lot going on below the surface with bamboo, and then it just starts sprouting all of a sudden. And people might see that kind of growth for this project once the momentum starts going. The integrations that have gone into it, it's been like, if I added my work compared to other people's, it would be like many decades of like deliberate progress to get something like this to the point where it looks like it's going. So we'll see how it unfolds, but that's the main thing. I'm going to be, all of my work is being repurposed into this new container and this new focus. And then besides that, I'm going to be out there with like my personal brand, just being an advocate and trying to spread awareness for things that I believe in. And of course, be a figurehead driving traffic to this parallel society. And we'll see how that goes as well, because I've pretty much just been private. I emerged a little bit in some of those things we were talking about, some of those communities, but I mostly just keep to myself. And nowadays I'm a family man with a wife and daughters and stuff. So I'm even more reclusive than normal, but I'm feeling like it's time to get out of my shell and just be doing best practices, sharing the progress on different projects and the learnings and the wisdom, and just contributing to the global voice basically that we all have. I feel like sometimes I'm not being a good friend to people because I'm not active enough out there publicly. So that's something I'm going to change this quarter and the next quarter. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm interested to see what happens and how that impacts my personal life and professional life, just mixing it out there with folks like yourself and others.
Yeah, exciting. Yeah, look forward to the future and what, and hopefully, yeah, like the even this kind of interview here is like a kind of early stage coming out of Seymour here with Super Civilization, super exciting project, all the elements that I've followed throughout the years with Dan Larimer, Fractally, EOS. I'm also curious about, before I forget, is there like a one commandment that you have yet? Or
Yeah,
is
there
there?
is
Okay.
something.
Okay.
We call it the prime law. And it's basically, it's like a formalized version of live and let live. So it's the one commandment is like no initiatory force. And so it's short enough that like you could memorize it and recite it. There's a little bit of a preamble, and then there is an Article 1 and Article 2, which is shorter than Article 1, and Article 3, which is shorter. And one good place to go and find it and read about it is if you go to curetoaging.com. I think you can find it on like the first article after the open letter that's on there. There's a short open letter on that website. And then the next, there's like a bunch of articles underneath it. And if you click on the first one, I think it says like a new idea or something, you'll be able to find that text for the prime law. So check that out on curetoaging.com. And shout out to Mark Hamilton, the guy who put that literature together and the open letter and all that stuff.
That's fantastic. It seems like like a core principle that everyone could kind of band together on and coalesce on. So really excited about that, to see the progress. Excited we'll have you back in the future to give us updates, and we'll see you a lot more, I'm sure, out there in the internet as you start to discuss these ideas more and more. So really, yeah, appreciate you coming out, and we're lucky to have you here at the early stages.
Yeah, likewise. It was very synchronistic that you invited me on. I was like, okay. And then I had a big shift of plans and finally made it on here. But I might have been talking about something a little different a week ago. That's like how big the shift has been.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So yeah, you can keep giving us updates, I'm sure. But the core principles, I think that seems like it's pretty much etched in stone in a way that can really bring people together. So if I like the idea of having one commandment, as I guess is advocated in the network state in Balaji, and just all the principles that I'm sure you're going to integrate with Dan Larimer's Fractally, just all the other kind of governance ideas that you've learned along the way. So excited. We'll put your Twitter handle at the bottom, also the website, if there is a website, and we'll probably put the other website you just mentioned on the
curetoaging.com. Yeah.
Cure to Aging. Okay, cool. That was great. Any last words? Any thoughts?
No, just appreciate it. I hope everybody got something out of this, and I'm excited to continue the journey. We'll see what happens next time we have a conversation here like this is recorded. Thanks, John.
Sounds good. All right. Really appreciate it. Have a great day, and yeah, we'll have you back soon. So have a good one.
You too.